Hi, it's Alex Cosper with SacTV.com. Welcome to my latest studio chat here at my recording studio. And at the end of this chat, you'll get to hear my latest recording, which is called Tariffs Burn Consumers. Why that song? Well, that's a topical song right now because Trump's tariffs are pushing everything else out of the news. Like that, he's just stealing headlines with his made up, manufactured problem. He set himself up to try to be the hero of the problem he created. But so far it hasn't played out that way. I mean, he did crash the markets in April, and then he had some nice rebounds when he said he was pulling back on his tariff threats, because that's what crashed the markets. It creates financial uncertainty, and it creates a lot of hysteria that prices are going to go up due to supply chains getting inundated with extra expenses. So anyway, Trump's tariffs, that's the big headline, the non-stop psyop. A psyop is a psychological operation. It's a known term in military, but it's also used in government and sometimes corporations. And psyop means psychological operation. And so that's what's going on in May of 2025, is a psychological operation that you could summarize as Trump's tariffs, because he's putting tariffs on imports from countries all over the world. But at the same time, he's pulling the levers of the stock market to react to how the market responds. And so he's playing a game, obviously, with the financial community, the biggest players on Wall Street. And it's hard to say who has the upper hand in that game. Historically, I would have said Wall Street controls this whole financial picture, but somehow Trump got his paws on the controls, and he seems to be the DJ at the nightclub deciding the music instead of owners, invisible owners. So it's hard to say. Is Trump himself a psyop, or is he just someone who naturally creates psyops because media is his big thing? That's how he made most of his money, is through media, not hotels and management and all that other mythology. He's more known for his bankruptcies for that type of world. Keep in mind, Trump was born rich. His dad, Fred, was started the Trump brand for hotels and other types of real estate. And he also had family members in government. I mean, Trump, he came from a background of elites. He did not come from the people. And so that confuses a lot of people, because he always posed as the guy on TV, long before he was president, as the friend of the people, that he was this billionaire, like the first billionaire you heard about who was a friend of the people. So anyway, that was a very mythological thing he created. And of course, Trump's book from 1987, The Art of the Deal, the title makes it seem like, oh, he's a great deal maker, even though he didn't write that book, like I talked about in the previous episode. What I want to get to today is how he's just manufacturing headlines that pushes real news out of the news. Now, he loves to talk about fake news. He himself has created a lot of fake news, but he's correct on a lot of things that he says is fake news. Like Russiagate was mostly fake news. We know that now, and that was all kind of concocted by the Hillary Clinton campaign and her lawyers, and so a lot of them in that circle got exposed for inventing information. The Mueller report, which was supposed to be the government investigation on that whole case. They didn't find con- uh, collusion, nor did they really have a conclusion about whether he created or committed any crimes. They just left it up in the air. And then the Senate investigated it, and they concluded there just, was nothing there. Although the Democrats in the Senate, they put their evidence in there that there was some type of shadiness going on between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials, but they never really came up with a big argument that proved that Trump stole that election in 2016, and he didn't. He won it because Hillary Clinton did not campaign in certain swing states that she just thought were blue states, and she was going to automatically win Wisconsin and some of those other states in the Midwest when she lost them because Trump campaigned there and she didn't. That is why she lost. She lost the swing states. Okay, plus she ran a horrible campaign. And so did Trump, but Trump his campaign was directed to his base, and his base of followers believed everything he said. Whereas Hillary Clinton, she didn't really have that solid of a base. She was just riding on the popularity of her husband, Bill Clinton, who had been president and remained popular throughout his term until probably afterward. Then a lot of stuff came out about what he was doing in the corporate world, favors for the corporate world, and they both did big favors for Walmart, which led to Walmart becoming one of the biggest companies in America. Basically, NAFTA, that sent cheap jobs overseas. That one of the first things Bill Clinton did as president was signing NAFTA, a trade agreement that allowed for corporations to just start moving their factories to Mexico and just hiring cheap labor, so that their CEOs and execs could, make tons more money while the workers didn't get that much more money. Clinton was anti-union, although posed as pro-union throughout the term. That's what they do. All politicians, they pose as certain things throughout their political careers, but when they finally get to pushing the buttons, it's for the opposite stuff. But Clinton turned out to be, like Carter, a union buster when the Democratic Party was thought of as pro-union. So that was a weird contradiction. And then Hillary Clinton served on the board of directors for Walmart back in the 80s and early 90s. And she got lots of shares out of Walmart. And that's part of how she became rich. But she didn't do anything to really help women gain status in the corporate world, even though she was in a position to, because I think she was the very first board member of Walmart to be a female. And she got that position because she was a lawyer, and her law firm had Walmart as a client. So that was that connection. And anyway, eventually she ran for Senate in New York and won, of course, and then ran for President of the United States in 2008 and lost the nomination to Barack Obama because she ran a horrible campaign. And she even tried to smear Obama on certain things that were just wrong. And he ran a great campaign because he said he was going to stop the stupid wars, that were just illegal and pathetic and wasting money, wasting billions while the financial world was crashing. And, the government invested in all this military waste, and it looked like Obama was going to come in and change things. And he was going to redistribute the wealth, is what some people thought, but that's not what happened. He turned out to be friends with Wall Street and did big favors for them, although he also punished them in certain ways that made them hate him, and so they supported Romney in 2012, whereas Obama was considered like an underdog in that race, but he was reelected anyway without the help of Wall Street. And he just kept on doing more and more Republican stuff that he admitted eventually, saying that his policies were kind of like mainstream Republicans in the 80s, kind of like what Reagan supporters would like. That's how Obama finished his term, reflecting on his policies. But he did a few things that could have been considered liberal, like he decriminalized cannabis to a degree, at least at the federal level, where, okay, it's still illegal, so it was up to Biden to change that, but he didn't. But at least Obama loosened that, because that was the outlawing of cannabis was all based on lies. It wasn't based on science or reality. And it was also based on corporations fearing that industry would creep into theirs and steal their wealth. And anyway, they had to loosen up those lousy laws that Nixon had tightened in the early 70s. So it was good that Obama did that. Plus, he used government money, taxpayer government money, to invest in green energy, and that was a good thing, because we need that. Unfortunately, he was good friends with Elon Musk, and loaded him up on subsidies, and so Musk then kind of became this chameleon guy who loves to talk about the future, but then the future never seems to catch up with his dreamlike visions. And so he basically has led a cult following of his stock shareholders who believe in his futuristic comments about a world full of robots and space travel and other sci-fi talk. And he's trying to be the king of AI and trying to be just the top techie guy, the guy you'd think of instead of Steve Jobs these days. But Steve Jobs was never a techie. He was more of a marketing guru who understood the vision of culture, especially youth culture, and he wanted to free people from the really tight structure of the elites, especially when it came to media. Steve Jobs was really into allowing for platforms to develop for independent media. He was very much into desktop publishing and creating like recording software, or his techies created it, recording software and software for the movie industry. And so that's how Apple kind of became favored in those industries. And getting back to this whole thing about Trump inventing headlines, it's all gone back to, for a while it looked like Facebook democratized news, like you could get your news on Facebook from friends who would post a mix of independent news and mainstream news. And then after a while, Facebook started getting in trouble for that, from the Trump administration and the Biden administration and the Trump administration again. So Facebook has reacted like a ping pong ball, just and complied with whatever the administration wanted them to do. So first they were cracking down on free speech, like during the Biden administration, and then once Trump got reelected, they seemed to withdraw those type of rules in what their algorithm highlights. By that I mean all these platforms, YouTube, Facebook, they have algorithms that decide, who gets to see what. The content is controlled by their algorithms and how it's distributed to who. So it's a new kind of media, new concept, and it's supposed to be targeting people based on their own personal interests, but we know that's not true. There's still using the old interruptive game of just trying to lure a bunch of people into a presentation, get an audience together with content, and then every now and then interrupt it with horrible ads. You know, that was the TV model, and they're still using that, but in a worse way. So anyway, so you don't have the same type of vibe you had like in the 2010s when independent media was really thriving. So now you got all this big mix of big media and independent media that you get on YouTube and other platforms, and there's a lot of wrong information out there. Meanwhile, Trump's stealing headlines just because big media put him up there. I mean, come on, I bet you think that CBS is a liberal network and hates Trump. At the top of that network is Sherry Redstone, who's a Democrat, but friends with Trump. Just like Trump is buds with a lot of media figures. For the longest time, he was buds with the head of NBC and CNN and just all these networks, Fox News, of course. He's basically a guy who started becoming friends with the media back in the 80s, first with NBC. He started making real estate deals with them. I don't think any of them ever came to fruition, but he was talking with them about real estate deals to do some kind of Trump TV network in New York and Manhattan. It never happened. So that was his main interest all along has been media and putting himself in the media. That's why he kept showing up on late night talk shows like Letterman and Leno and always being asked, so do you ever plan to run for president? Oprah asked him that back in 1987, and even before that, even before he was old enough to run for president, he was being asked by media outlets, "Do you ever plan to run for president?" Because he was rich. He was rich in New York, Manhattan, the home of NBC and all the big networks. And so his name was big already in the 70s because of his father had built up the brand. But then Donald Trump started getting all this airtime, and of course America is, oh wow, when it comes to millionaires and billionaires, like, oh, he must be successful. But it turned out he wasn't. He was just born rich, inherited a lot of money, then used that to leverage other money and other people's money, and so his casinos failed. And he had to file bankruptcy 4 times. And so he was a business failure is what he was. And he continues to own the Trump organization. That still seems like a family conflict of interest. But anyway, who cares, right? So Trump built himself into a media figure that now gets to dictate headlines and gets to create as many psyops as he wants that rock the stock market up and down. And that's important because the top players know how to play that. They make money either way, either buying along when the market goes down and then profiting off of price gains, or shorting the market, which is betting against the market. That's where you sell first and then buy later at a lower price and pocket the difference. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a New York congresswoman, has accused Trump of manipulating the stock market. And so that would explain why it goes hand in hand with being in charge of the media, like having this big impact on media, like the Wizard of Oz, and profiting off it off the side in secret ways. But we don't know if that's true. And that brings me to my next point is, how do we know what's true? Whether it's big dumb media telling us stuff or small indie media just mimicking big dumb media, or even making up their own stuff, or investigating it and coming up with their own conclusions. But you notice it's always the big players that decide what goes into the history books and what is considered official information. The Warren Report, which is full of flaws and lies and baloney, still is the official report on the JFK assassination, although it was superseded many people believe it was superseded by the 1979 House report that reopened the case and concluded Kennedy was probably killed as the result of a conspiracy. That was the last official word on it, but big dumb media ignores that and still goes with the Warren report as their official story on that case. Just ridiculous. All you have to do is study the case for about an hour, just the raw facts, and you realize, oh, Oswald was framed. They made up this stuff that he was the lone nut because that would close the case so they could get on with the Vietnam War, which was why Kennedy was assassinated, because he didn't want to escalate the Vietnam War. But LBJ did, and LBJ was connected with the military-industrial complex and friends with those guys, and he was bankrolled by those guys, and so that becomes another reason why Kennedy was killed. Was he didn't want to comply with the power structure that was creeping in the background that some people call the deep state. That does exist as a real term, but mainstream media tries to ridicule people who use that term because they themselves are they're actually partners with the deep state. And so anyway, Trump has been king of the media, no longer Howard Stern or Rush Limbaugh or any of these names of the past that you thought were the top of the media. It's Trump, and it doesn't matter if the outlet leans Democrat or Republican. They're talking about Trump 24/7, which makes him the top of the media, and he gets to set media agendas because of that. He gets to just make up stories, which he's done with the tariff thing, and that's why I want to conclude with my song "Terrible Tariffs Burn Consumers." But before that, I just want to say one of the stories that's been pushed out of the news is Virginia Roberts, born in Sacramento. Who did she become? Virginia Giuffre, the Epstein victim, Jeffrey Epstein victim. You probably know, at least from putting pieces of the story together over many years, that Jeffrey Epstein ran or was involved in a sex trafficking organization, an illegal underground organization that was connected with fronts, like modeling fronts that would they were recruiting minors, females and males, but minors that would become sex slaves for elites. And some of those elites, we can't really name exactly who they are, but big names have come out in that case. Virginia, she was born in 1983 in Sacramento, and then 4 years later moved to Florida. And then by age 14, she was a runaway, and she actually got mixed up in a sex cult thing where some old guy was using her. She finally went back home in 1997, age 14, to live with her father, and he had, in Florida, and he, at that point, he was the maintenance director for Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, okay? So in other words, he worked directly for Trump. And so he gave her a job there. We know Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein back in 1992 because NBC has the footage at Mar-a-Lago of those two together laughing at all the girls there. And in 1994, that resort expanded to become like a members-only club of elites. So just so you know the timeline. So then in 97, okay, that's when Virginia was hired there to do work as a spa attendant. And then 2000 to 2002, through that resort, she met a woman by the name of Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, now a lot of people mispronounce her name because it's spelled Ghislaine. They pronounce it as Ghislaine, and it's not. It's Ghislaine. She's from England, and her dad was one of the top publishers in the world, one of the biggest publishers of all time. So already this is a kind of a secret media story, right? And that's why the media wants to bury this story, because it involves media giants, okay? Behind the scenes elites. Yeah, Robert Maxwell, a huge publisher. His daughter, Ghislaine, okay, she was close friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Some say they were lovers or whatever. They had a relationship, and they ran this sex trafficking organization for minors. And that's how Virginia got involved with them through Mar-a-Lago, because Ghislaine and Epstein were friends with Trump, so naturally they were, new people at Mar-a-Lago. So from 2000 to 2002, Virginia became like this massage assistant who was really involved in sexual encounters with clients of Epstein and Maxwell. And so anyway, this was an illegal operation, and eventually through this organization, this illegal operation, she was flown to Thailand by Ghislaine, and that's where she met her future husband, Robert Giuffre. And he was from Australia. He was a martial arts trainer, and so she fell in love with him, and they moved to his home in Australia for several years. And that's how she ended up in Australia. But she died on February 25th, 2025. And her family called it suicide, even though she had warned beforehand in videos that she would never commit suicide, and that if you ever saw her being accused of that after the fact, that it was an indication of foul play. So anyway, her family says it was suicide. Authorities, I guess, are going along with that, but her lawyer, Virginia's lawyer, doubts it, and others are challenging it. So it's weird, because she said she got in a bus accident, and then that led to renal failure, which is associated with kidney failure, and that she only had days to live. She was badly bruised in a social media post, and then next thing you know, she dies, and they're calling it suicide. It's one of those weird things where something's called suicide when nobody really knows. It makes you wonder, what are the facts? Okay, is it really, why would someone kill themselves? Wouldn't there be some indication they would do that? Did she leave a suicide note? No. You can look at lots of suicide cases and ask these same questions. Marilyn Monroe, Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell. There's a long list of people who they say committed suicide, but if you study the facts closely, it would make you want to reopen those cases and at least get deeper information on it, because a lot of it doesn't add up. Okay, especially in this case. But it was not that big of a headline. Why? Because, Trump's tariffs are dominating the headlines. So anyway, you're not going to find out too much about the Epstein case anyway. They really tried to bury it. Epstein himself, they said, was suicide in prison in 2019 when he was still facing charges for all this other sex trafficking of minors. So that is weird. Who was Jeffrey Epstein? He was tied in with the financial world of Wall Street. So he was considered a financial advisor to some people. He oversaw a huge estate. And so people trusted him for financial advice. Bill Gates, apparently, it ruined Bill Gates' marriage for hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, a known sex offender. That's why his wife left him. It was known. Why are you hanging out with this guy who's a known sex offender? Um, and and so Jeffrey Epstein had this island where he'd send people with the underage girls, so his clients, financial clients, Wall Street type clients, apparently got favors like flights on his airplane to his island, his secret island, to his secret mansions full of secret sex slaves. And some of the people who went on these trips included former President Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew. In fact, there's a controversial 2001 photo of Virginia with Prince Andrew of England and Ghislaine, and still Prince Andrew tried to deny that he even knew who she was. And he gave this disastrous interview in 2019 that ruined his whole image, where he came off as a liar. He denied the whole thing. And eventually in 2022, he settled the case for an undisclosed, well, it was a disclosed settlement of $500,000 to Virginia. Okay, so that gives you some background. Why is this all being downplayed in the media? Well, I think for one thing, the topic of child sex abuse is not that family friendly, so you're not going to get it as much on mainstream media. But also because the biggest media outlets are friends with some of the biggest friends of Epstein, So Epstein, he actually had a Manhattan apartment where he threw media parties at his home, and Prince Andrew attended one of those parties in 2010, as did big media figures like Katie Couric and George Stephanopoulos. There's photography that proves this happened. And anyway, so the media tries to distance themselves from Epstein because he was a close friend of theirs, and they probably helped keep the story under wraps because there's been lots of victims, hundreds of victims, but it's just downplayed. And then you get independent media, so we don't have a lot of information about that. But then Trump, his FBI director, Kash Patel, and his Attorney General, Pam Biondi, they say they're going to declassify all the Epstein files, and they said that back in February, and then someone asked Pam about that a few months later, and then she immediately, downplayed the fact that they really haven't released all the files, even though they said they would. When they're not really sorting it out and telling us what's really going on with each case, they're just smearing it all together is what it looks like. And then you got Sean Puffy Combs, the famous rapper, producer in the music biz, friends with Clive Davis. He's on trial for all kinds of illegal sexual activity, according to the charges. So there's people now like Whitney Webb trying to link that as all part of this one big sex mob thing. And I'm not saying that's not true. That might be true, except I noticed that people like Whitney Webb mispronounce names of key figures, which tells me she hasn't done enough research to find out what she's even talking about. Like when she talks about the music industry, she mentioned this mobster named Morris Levy, spelled Levy. Anyone who's I knew lots of people in the music industry and have studied it, so I know that's how you pronounce his name, Morris Levy, but she called him Levy. As a key figure that was part of organized crime in the past, record label owner. So that's one thing. And she also mispronounced Ghislaine. It's she would say Ghislaine. So does Jimmy Dore. He says Ghislaine. And some of his friends, like Graham Elwood, says Ghislaine, and it's pronounced Ghislaine. Now, most of mainstream media almost says it right. They say Ghislaine. Virginia said in TV interviews, Ghislaine, sometimes Ghislaine.
What was her pitch to you?
I'm working at Mar-a-Lago, loving it. I'm working in the spa area. I was reading about anatomy and massage, and that's when Ghislaine came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you're reading a book about massage." And, you know, long story short, she told me that she knew of a man who was looking for a traveling masseuse. And if he liked me, then I would get educated and I would become a real massage therapist.
You know, there's names are mispronounced all the time in the media. One big example was Andrew Carnegie. It's commonly mispronounced as Carnegie. But if you actually met the actual person and talked to him and asked him, how do you pronounce your name? He would have said, Andrew Carnegie, and my nickname is Neg. And still, because of media spreading wrong stuff, wrong information, a lot of people have learned to mispronounce it as Carnegie Hall. But that's not important. Like, as long as people know what you're talking about, that's fine. But mispronouncing names of key figures of a deep case where you're trying to show that you're doing your research, you know, and where media has dropped the ball, you're picking it up, and you still mispronounce the names, that calls for just better editing. Anyway, I'm going to edit it right now. That's enough for now, but just to let you know, big dumb media is full of misinformation. They've done it for years and years and years. They're also involved with cover-ups because they themselves are involved with the intelligence community and deciding what kind of psyops are going to be the main narratives. And right now the main narrative is Trump's tariffs. It's not Jeffrey Epstein and how he was involved with hundreds of sexual abuse cases that intertwine with Wall Street and probably the entertainment world. Anyway, yeah, and even Puff Daddy, or whatever he calls himself now, he threw big sex parties at his house, according to some of his best friends. And there was lots of illegal activity, especially with minors. And so even his trial is upstaged and overshadowed by the Trump tariffs. So let's get to my song now. My latest song is satire on that. It's called Terrible Tariffs Burn Consumers. Why do we need terrible tariffs to divide us? Seems it would be better if we find something to unite us.